Okay, so how much profit is too much profit for a Christian business owner? And the Christian business owner idea is interesting because oftentimes people, if you're leading with anything Christian related, they kind of view any profit as bad and as you're exploiting people. If you aren't making enough profit, well, you won't have a business. So as a Christian business owner, how much profit is too much profit? There's a lot of bad theology and ideology around business. And most people who do speak on kingdom entrepreneurship or kingdom business tend to kind of have more of a prosperity slant, which is why I'm excited to be talking about this on the Bless God Business channel. If you guys don't know, 2015 to 2020, 2021, I was a professional independent Christian music artist, traveled all around the country. And in that window of time, I also would help other Christian music artists kind of build and structure out how they're doing things, anchored on this verse here, which is 1 Timothy 5, verse 8, anyone who does not provide for their relatives and especially for their own households has denied the faith and is worse than a non-believer. If you are going to do anything and it's costing your lack of provision, financial, and I would say beyond financial, according to the scriptures, you're worse than a non-believer. And this is in the context of the local church and caring for widows and making sure that the church is taking care of their own extended family and their immediate family. That is the paradigm. I was doing a lot of content on my main channel, Ruslan KD. And since I've been so blessed to open up the Bless God Business channel, so if you're new here, not new here, hit that subscribe button. Really trying to help people reframe and reorient themselves around this topic of biblical business. And the scriptures say a whole lot about it. So how much profit is too much profit? I think the idea of too much profit is subjective based on a couple of variables. Variable number one is, what does it cost to live where you live? And what does it cost to do what you do? And what does it cost to give to your family and your ministries and your charities? The second aspect is greed is an issue of the heart, meaning that you can't always see greed on the surface. We know that we are to not just look at external appearances, but to try and look at the heart. And sometimes looking at the heart, you just don't know what you don't know, because someone may appear a certain way and you find out that they're one of the most generous people you've ever met. And sometimes the most pious, self-righteous people are just that. They're self-righteous and they're actually very stingy and not very generous. So greed is one of those things that could be difficult to decipher, especially when you look at wealthy Christians. The majority of charitable giving, the majority of giving to churches, the majority of philanthropy is done by Christians who are very wealthy. And if you start getting into the millionaires, to the decamillionaires, to the billionaires, the Truett Cathys of the world, the Green families, they do the vast majority giving and give away billions of dollars, right? And so how do we navigate the idea of greed? I don't think it's about a dollar amount or a profit margin. I actually think it's a heart issue. And if your heart is greedy, you'll be greedy with a little bit and you'll be greedy with a lot. But if you can learn to be generous, which is how we combat greed, then you'll be generous with a little, you'll be generous with a lot. So this idea of first providing for our own household, first providing for our own family, our extended family, then venturing out and being generous with the local church, our local community, so on and so forth, I think is how we anchor this. So I think profit is good. I think if you don't have profit, you don't have a business. I think if you don't have a business, then you can't give to your church and be generous. And so I think that's the framing of it. Now, there's a couple other verses we're going to be looking at. Okay, so there's this interesting passage, Proverbs 11:26. It says, people curse the one who hoards grain. So remember, a grain is a resource. It's a commodity. It could be viewed as a service. It could be viewed as a product. This product specifically feeds people. So it says, people curse the one who hoards grain, but they pray God's blessing on the one who is willing to sell. So if you're hoarding back your potential resource that can be a blessing to people, that's not good. And if you're willing to sell, then people are happy with that. They're praying God's blessing on that. I think in our modern day context, very few of us are growing grain, but many of us have different services that we could offer people, different products. And the difference between being a business person or being someone that's in the marketplace as an entrepreneur is, are you willing to take the risk attached to building something that is yours in the sense of you're responsible? Ultimately, it's God's, but you're responsible. The buck stops with you. If the business rises or if it crashes, it's ultimately your responsibility. And I believe God is in that. But I think that is the tension that we get to walk in. So if you are working for somebody else, that's fine too. If you don't want to be an entrepreneur, that's fine too. This channel is specifically for people who love Jesus and are interested in how to do kingdom entrepreneurship biblically, and it's a passion of mine. So this idea is also extended in what we see in Proverbs chapter 31, verse 15. Now, this is about the Proverbs 31 woman, but what makes this verse so astonishing is that she's a woman. That's what we point to. Now, I would also argue there's probably a woman that's a bit more mature. It sounds like her kids are probably a little older, so this isn't someone that just had a newborn. This is someone that's a bit mature, but I think the principle still holds true. This is talking about business in a positive light. Let's look at it. Proverbs 31:15, it says, she gets up while it is still night, so the sun isn't out yet. She provides food for her family. There's that provision verse again, and portions for her female servants. I think in this context, it's fair to say her female servants are probably like people who work with her and for her. She considers a field and buys it. Out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. So she has excess money. That means she's not just living paycheck to paycheck like the vast majority of people. She has excess money. She sees something that she can cultivate, which is a field, and she buys it with the excess, the abundance that she has out of her earnings. I mean, she has a different revenue streams. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her tasks. This isn't a get-rich-quick scheme. This is someone that's working with their hands. It's difficult work, and it says her arms are strong. She got some guns on her. She got some biceps on her, right? She sees that her trading is profitable. Okay, so there is profit. There's a positive mention of profit in the Bible, in the Old Testament and Proverbs, and we, in a previous video, looked at it in the context of Luke chapter 19, where it talks about having a profit in terms of leveraging our time, talent, and treasure to honor God, right? And her lamp does not go out at night. Okay, that is, I think, alluding to the idea that she has enough means to make sure that her light is on. I'm sure there's a metaphorical meaning, but this is also speaking in the natural. In her hands, she holds the distaff and grasps the spindle with her fingers. She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. So when it comes to the idea of greed, this is someone that is combating greed by being generous, that we are blessed to be a blessing. If you have 5 talents and you're leveraging those to be a blessing, in Matthew 25, it's interesting that the parable of the talents goes right into caring for the least of these. Jesus says, hey, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was in prison, you visited me. Guess what it requires to do all those things, right? And he's talking about what you've done to the least of these, you've done unto me, blessing the poor, being generous with the poor. That requires excess. That requires having your needs first met. Again, remember in the context of we are to first provide for the needs of our household and our extended family. She is now that her household is taken care of, that her household is solid, that her kids are solid, that her servants are taken care of. She now is able to open her arms to the poor, right? And there's a lot of scriptures in there about blessing the poor in Proverbs. And that is a good thing. And her hands to the needy. When it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. She makes coverings for her bed. She is clothed in fine linen and purple. Her husband is respected at the gate when he takes his seat among the elders.
So she even has nice things.
Sounds like she has some nice things. So I don't know what that means. And nice is relative.
Nice is relative.
Right? When I was living in a 850 square foot, 2-bedroom, 2.5 bathroom with a family of 4, sometimes a family of 5, sometimes a family of 6, that was nice for someone that is probably coming from a developing world. So nice is relative, right? By the grace of God and what we've been able to do, I've been able to buy a house in Southern California at the end of 2022. We moved in 2023, so we've been here for 2 years. Our studio is 350 square foot.
In the garage.
In the garage. The rest of my house is probably around 1,300 square feet, right? So this is nice for me. Like I grew up on welfare. I also remember growing up in the former Soviet Union. So nice things is going to be relative depending on what someone's vantage point is.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think even from a nitty-gritty perspective, from a Christian business perspective, there's a certain level as you grow a business into which you realize, oh, profit isn't all it's cracked up to be. Meaning, and I want you to explain this, this is something you discovered even within the past 2 years, which is the idea of retained earnings and how that plays into profit. Can you explain what retained earnings is?
Well, retained earnings, again, we're talking about profit margins. Retained earnings is what do you make after everyone's expenses are taken care of, after everyone's paid, after health insurance is paid, taxes are paid, everyone is fed. The retained earnings is that last difference, right? And as a business owner, you want reserves. You want some money tucked away in case YouTube gets demonetized. In case
retained earnings is the emergency fund for the business.
The emergency
right?
fund for the business. In case something goes left, right? In
Yep.
case you hit a dry spell, in case someone gets sick, you need retained earnings, right? And I think a good business, and this is what we're working towards, we're nowhere near here, would be to have, at some point, God willing, to have 6 months of reserves just in case anything goes wrong.
Meaning we could not profit anything for 6 months and everyone's bills are paid. I can feed my family. Chris can feed his family. Samaje can feed himself.
Yeah, it's the same idea as having an emergency fund for your own household.
Yep.
You know?
Yep, that makes sense. And so it's so
And again, to be clear, we're not there right now, and
Totally.
we want to get there.
exactly. But the idea of having of like how much profit is too much profit starts to crumble when you actually look at what a healthy business looks like.
That's right.
Because it's like, well, I have X amount of dollars in my bank. And it's like, okay, cool. Well, is that enough to support yourself for 6 months? And it's like, well, no. Well, you get yourself there. Like, okay, well, I have 6 months emergency fund. Okay, well, is that enough to support your contractors if you were to not bring home money, or are you just going to have accounts receivable that you can't pay? And it's like, well, no. Okay, well, now you need to profit enough to where you're saving enough, and then not to mention, you got to pay taxes on that as it's business income at the end of the year. So you got to have enough to have taxes on it and have 6 months. And so the idea of how much is too much almost becomes like an unreachable thing for most small businesses.
Yeah.
Because there's always another level to safety, financial security inside of a business context. And then I feel like in the midst of that, personally, is also what you're talking about of like you as a business owner, separate from a healthy business, you're the owner, right? So you're getting paid from the business. You are then going and doing these things like providing and tithing and
Being generous, taking care of the poor,
Yeah.
all those sorts of things. And again, you can't do those if you don't have personal access. We do some of that as a business in terms of stuff.
paying
we
your
do
employees
businesses.
to do the same and be generous.
Yeah, paying
right?
employees generously so
Yeah.
that they're not living with razor sharp margins in their own life, paycheck to paycheck, right? So I think all of that contributes to this, because if you don't have any type of margin, you're going to run yourself in the ground. And people then ask the question, well, how much is too much profit? It's like asking how much is too buff?
Yeah.
How much is too buff? And it's like, well, let's be honest. The vast majority of us are overweight and are not going to the gym at all and aren't eating right. And so it's the wrong framing of the question, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right now, again, if you are vain when you're overweight and sloppy, you're going to be vain when you're, shredded.
Yeah.
The issue is, where are you at right now? The vast majority of people who are watching this channel, the vast majority of us in our personal lives, we have quite a bit of room to grow to get to a stable, healthy place within our fitness. And so the question of like, how much before I get too buff? I don't want to work out because I might get too bulky. And it's like, wrong question.
And I think even if you are at the point where you're asking, man, do I have too much profit? And the Bible doesn't already, and the church doesn't already clearly answer that for you, which is like, hey, be generous. If you're there, you're already really generous. You have still tons of money left over. Then the amount of people you have helped to have that much profit is probably insane. Because unlike the internet would like most people to believe, is that making a ton of money is not easy. That is really hard. So it's like, oh, I feel bad for selling this shirt at 100% margin. It's like, yeah, because no one's buying it. No one's gonna buy your $15 shirt for $150. Yeah, so the idea that you're gonna sell something for 100% or a 90% margin, profit margin, is almost like it's a non sequitur. It doesn't even make sense because no one's gonna afford that in the first place. So the scenario that you're actually making a ton of money is a scenario that we've explained previously, which is like you have such an amazing product that people can't stop talking about it and they need it in their lives. And then we approach the gates of the question of, do I have too much profit?
Right. And again, that is not a zero-sum game. To build something that people want, that they're willing to pay money for, is not someone is taking a L while you're taking a W. Going back to the first video on this series, that is a Marxist communistic paradigm. You think that because you are making money, that someone else is losing. The reality is a great product is a win-win. It's a win for the people making the product, the people selling the product, the people receiving the product, and the people using the product are all excited about said product. That is very difficult. Very
Yeah.
difficult to build something like that. Hey, if you want to see the first video on this series about the theology around business and profit margins and all that good stuff, check out this video over there, all right? I'll see you over here. Peace.